Welcome back to another episode of Marvelman901. So today is Spider-Man Day, which means I'm gonna talk about Spider-Man related comics and characters. Gonna start off with Venom the Mace, issue 3, Spider-Man 2099, issue 21, Amazing Spider-Man, issue 28, and the character known as Lightmaster. So I'm gonna start off with Venom the Mace, issue 3, from 1994. So basically the Venom and the Mace fought the Sunrise Society, which is where the Mace basically had escaped from earlier on. So these Sunrise Society are of course very highly technologically advanced and very brutal. So naturally it's a big ass fight. Eventually though, the almost entire Sunrise Society are basically wiped out, killed by Mace and Venom. It basically somewhat ends with Venom learning the truth about actually Mace having been there to help with the whole undergrounders and the squatters thing, basically trying to protect squatters from undergrounders. And naturally Venom is basically protecting the undergrounders. And the Mace basically kills the leader here, who is pretty much like a clone of himself or something like that. It's very, very, very similar, basically calling him brother. After this, Mace naturally basically leaves. He thinks his contract is finished here with the undergrounders. Venom, meanwhile, basically is ordered to banish these few undergrounders that had attacked the squatters earlier on. Basically, he was supposed to banish them from the undergrounders, but he banished them from life instead. So I'm gonna move to the future now with Spider-Man 2099 issue 21 from 1994. So Spider-Man was basically just checking out a thing that the Vulture had said earlier to him about something like what are you something that the indies said, the creators, something like that. So he basically was checking out the area when 3 women who actually killed a guy in cold blood, just very, very brutally. So Spider-Man actually confronts them, and it turns out that they are basically just 3 black-card brats with a lot of money and had basically bought a lot of highly technologically advanced weapons and such. And now Spider-Man naturally had to fight them. So there's a lot of different Spider-Man tactics to defeat these girls, and he actually defeats them fairly easily, to be honest. So that is that issue. I'm gonna go back to 1965 now with Amazing Spider-Man issue 28. This is an interesting issue as it introduces the Molten Man. So basically Peter Parker went to Smythe, the guy who actually had created the first Spider Slayer. To him it's basically just to check up on the machine, as he says to him, but in actuality he wanted to switch the costumes. He had basically lost his costume in the fight against the Spider Slayer earlier on, and he had bought a kind of cheap costume at a costume shop, but it was awful to use. So he needed to basically switch them out to get back his own suit. So while he's there, Smythe and a guy called Mark Raxton are arguing about a new invention that apparently Raxton had invested in. This invention was basically called the liquid metal alloy, a special one that is. And so they started to fight basically. Peter tried to help Smythe but was attacked by the Spider Slayer, which was basically somewhat turned on next to him. So while he was trying to get out of the Slayer basically, which he did, the jar that contained the liquid metal alloy that Mark Raxton held broke, and it covered Raxton with this liquid metal alloy and basically got absorbed into his skin and into his bloodstream and body and all that. So he kinda just escaped, and Peter Parker naturally got loose from the Spider Slayer to check up on Smythe. He got the address to Raxton from Smythe and then went there basically as Spider-Man. Spider-Man and the Molten Man now fights, and Molten Man is pretty strong. He can take a lot of beating and the spiderweb just falls right off him. So it's a lot of fighting there in his apartment. However, Spider-Man managed to basically hogtie this guy and eventually delayed long enough for the police to arrive and arrest Raxton. So another side note here, Peter Parker graduated from high school. Great thing. J. Jonah Jameson was basically a guest speaker there, and he then tried to get Parker back to the Daily Bugle, as Parker basically decided to stop selling photos to J. Jonah Jameson, as he's pretty sick of him, and basically was selling them to the Daily Globe instead, which was basically rival magazine. Meanwhile, Liz Allen basically explained the crush that she had on Peter, that she of course had a big crush on him, but it felt like he was more interested in other women such as Betty Brant and Mary Jane. Naturally, Peter never actually realized that Liz actually had a crush on him, and now she felt like she needed to grow up out of this kind of schoolgirl facade and become woman instead. So she basically just left him there. Pretty interesting issue indeed. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the character of this day. This is Lightmaster. His real name is Edward Lansky, and he was actually a very brilliant physics professor. He was introduced in Spectacular Spider-Man issue 3 from 1977, and he was born in New York. Basically, the thing about Lightmaster is that he has this special bodysuit that he has created that can basically manipulate photons all around to create solid light and concussive force and even fly with it. So it's actually quite powerful and very interesting villain indeed. He was basically very active during the 70s and 80s. Not so much in the 90s though, as far as I've seen anyway. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. Do subscribe and share this if you like this. All of this is of course Smallwood's creation, someone telling the stories. Have a good day and stay safe.